Okay, it's 11 o'clock, so I think we can get started. Can everyone see my screen as well? Okay, great. So my name is Kevin. Tom is actually at a conference today, so I'll be holding the best practices webinar. Some of the topics I want to cover is the general best practices of using StockTrak in your classes, some information about what works and what doesn't for different types of classes, and some of the features of StockTrak that you may or may not be familiar with and how they really work to make it better and easier for you to run your classes and more engaging for your students who are in your classes. So first, a little bit about StockTrak. StockTrak was created by our current president and CEO, Mark Brookshire. He actually started this just after he obtained his MBA from Georgia Tech. This was back in 1990. He had already had his own brokerage account, and when he took his portfolio management class, he found it was a bit lacking. By chance, he happened to meet up with his professor about 2 months after he graduated, and his professor asked him his honest opinion. He said he found it was boring and thought that it was kind of disappointing how sterilized it became when it really got taken out of the context of the real market. So his professor agreed, and Mark offered to actually build a simulation for the next year's class. So he built the simulation. It was a huge hit, and it basically rapidly expanded across universities all across the US, and then it's even expanded to high schools now. So since 1990, we have had over 7 million students use one of our trading platforms in some way. About 15,000 classrooms per year. A little over 1,000 of those are universities, and the rest are high schools using our separate high school site. And it basically works by professors set up a portfolio simulation for their class. What makes it useful is that the professors can control all of the trading parameters, from the types of securities the students can trade, to the commissions, to the dates, to how many trades students can make in the portfolio, interest rates, and all kinds of other stuff. So there's a lot available, and basically we have the whole of StockTrak is designed around the classroom, making it more useful and more engaging to use in your classes. So just for some background, we also do surveys of our students every year, actually every semester. So in the fall of 2017, we had 2,300 people respond. 88% of them said StockTrak made them a stronger candidate in the job market after they graduated. 93% recommend the professor continue using it in all future semesters. 98% say StockTrak added value to their class. The one that we really emphasize in the last year or two is that StockTrak is making students better candidates in the job market. We're actively encouraging that too. We have what's called the StockTrak Career Center built in. So if you are using StockTrak in your classes, your students get access to this. This has job and internship postings. There's about 250,000 jobs and internships in here at any given time from all around the world. Information about certifications they would need to actually enter the job, the financial sector. And we even have job search tips with help building resumes, help preparing for interviews, and all kinds of things for fresh graduates. The main benefits that you're going to see when you start using the portfolio simulation in your classes, there's two classes basically. There's the stuff that the students actually get while they're in your class, and then there's the stuff that they get when they actually graduate. So in your class, it's a direct application of the real world. This helps, first, a lot of students who learn best by doing. I'm one of the students, that was me when I was in school, and you hear how portfolios work, you learn how investing works in the class and the lectures, but when you actually start to build your own portfolio, it's a completely different ballgame. We see a lot of students who master these materials a lot more readily just because it helps them understand what exactly they're talking about in class. It also helps reinforce the long-term decision-making aspect of investing. It's the best way to enforce the concept of time horizons with investing. While their class portfolio is usually only a couple of months, you can also do things like have students manage multiple portfolios with trading restrictions, give them only like 5 or 6 trades that has to cover 3 months, and it basically helps them understand the difference between what they're doing in a short-term versus a long-term plan. Both of these add up to a big increase in student engagement. Your students who are already succeeding in class are going to think they know what's best, but all the students who struggle in the actual lectures period, this gives them a new way to learn, a new way to catch up. In the long run, after the class ends, this is where we get a lot of the information about how this is a lot of the feedback we get from students after they finish their classes. We really can't emphasize enough the importance of promoting the financial literacy and investing. Even if only 10% of your students end up working in the financial sector, all of them really need to know what it means to build a portfolio, to buy a stock, and how all this works. Even if they're not using their portfolio themselves, this gives them the tools they need to have intelligent conversations with wealth managers later in life. This serves as basically the foundation of their saving and investing habits even after graduation. Your StockTrak project is also one of the most common things we see popping up in resumes. So if you look at here, I just did a search right before we started here. I have over 346 people in the last couple of months for putting StockTrak on their resumes. The first one I pulled up here actually puts their StockTrak portfolio as in their work experience. And this is one of the few things that we often see as a class project that keeps popping up of students wanting to include this in their resume right when they graduate, because it makes them look better to their first employers. Since it's a real-world exercise, it's justifiable, and we hear good things from employers too, who are hiring students that have some experience building a portfolio. And at the end of the day, this is really what your students are going to remember 10 years down the line. They might not remember everything they learned in the class. They might not remember the textbook, but they will remember building a portfolio. They're going to remember their class rankings. They're going to remember what worked and what didn't. So this is basically what we like to tell professors when they're first looking to start using StockTrak, because it's more than just your class. It's going to be with your students for a long time afterwards. So best practices. This is the stuff that applies basically regardless of what class you're teaching. This is what's going to work for your students. First, the longer your trading period, the better. This is just a time horizons thing. Regardless of the length of your class, it's not really long enough to determine whether or not a student's going to be a good investor for the rest of their life. But the shorter class periods have a problem of just being too susceptible to general market fluctuations, and not enough where students can really start putting their research into practice. So when you get into the 2 or 3 month range, that's a little bit better. The shorter ranges, we've seen some classes trying to just run it for a month near the end of the term. It does help, but it's not nearly as effective as the longer trading periods. Your students will have questions when they're getting started. So one of the features that we've had for the last couple of years that we always encourage is what's called assignments. The assignments feature lets you actually put in place tasks for your students to do. Let me pull it up here. This include things like reading articles, watching tutorial videos, making certain kinds of trades. This is the assignments page here, and these first 7 items is what we recommend basically for every single class. Reading a couple articles about what stocks are, how to get stock quotes, how to do some basic research on the site, and then moving through to actually watching tutorial videos about what all the pages in the site do, how can they make their first stock trade. All these things is really what we encourage professors to have students do before they even start placing trades. I'll walk through the actual process of putting an assignment in place in a little while. I also think that, we also find that it helps students a lot when they take notes during the trading period. With every single trade, we find it very important for students to be taking notes, following up, that they can follow up with later. So for example, in our trading page, we build this in. After a student starts making their trade, they'll put in their symbol and their quantity, and then when they preview their order, we ask them to write a note about the trade. So this is just a couple sentences about why they think this is a good idea. Every student can do this by default, but as the professor, you can also mandate it, so they need to take notes with every single trade. This is helpful not just because it forces them to justify what they're doing, but they can also come back and review these notes later when they're making things like the end of class reports. And speaking of the end of class reports, it really helps to finish your class by having your students write a report outlining their portfolio experience. They should start the project with a mission statement, what they want their portfolio to do, and then end the class by basically outlining how well they were able to achieve those goals. This is something that we see in basically every type of class, from personal finance to derivatives to investments, portfolio management, and everything in between. If you are having your students work in teams, you can also have them do a 5 to 10 minute presentation towards the end of the class. If you're having students work individually, that might just take up too much class time, but it depends on how you have your classes structured. Some best practices per class type. If you're doing a portfolio management or investments class, really start small. Only really allow your students to trade stocks and ETFs for their first week or two. And then as you cover more security types, more investment options, you can start adding more security types available for them to trade. So in our class creation page, you actually can select which security types and which international exchanges you want your students to be able to trade in. And as your class goes on, you can actually edit these rules to turn on and turn off exchanges and security types, basically as your class develops. So like I said, we normally recommend just starting with the equities and then turning on mutual funds, turning on bonds, turning on options as your class starts covering those topics. We also recommend that you pair that with an assignment for each one. So when you start allowing mutual funds, you can create a new assignment requiring them to read the mutual funds article, watch the mutual funds tutorial video, and even make a few trades of mutual funds just so they get practice of building that into their portfolio. If you are doing a derivatives class, for the portfolio management and investments, we also do encourage using that active and passive portfolio structure. This means that students would have two completely separated portfolios. One of them would have something like 300 trades allowed for their entire trading duration, and the second would be called the buy and hold, where they get a maximum of 10 trades. This is how you reinforce those time horizons, and it also is an excellent learning exercise because 7 out of 10 times we see the buy and hold portfolios outperforming the active trading portfolios. If you're taking a derivatives class, we usually don't recommend your students trading right away at all. Really start with an assignment with those tutorial articles and tutorial videos showing them how to make those options and futures trades before they make the first trade. This reduces a lot of confusion. It's not necessary, but we do see there's usually 1 or 2 students in each class that struggles with understanding what they're doing because they probably didn't quite understand what they're doing in class either. This again, it goes with the assignments feature. You can have your assignment start even before your class trading starts. So if you want to have your students start registering and then work on that assignment right away, reading those articles, watching those videos, and then trading starts a week or 2 later. And again, with derivatives, it's especially important to introduce these security types one at a time and then require students to make a trade of each security type before they move on to the next. If you're doing like a fixed income or a bonds trading class, you can have just a bonds portfolio. You don't need to include stocks or options or anything else. For all bonds, we have over 300 bonds available. It's a selection of U.S. corporate and treasury bonds. We do pay the interest with each bond as it's due, and we pay out the coupon when the bonds expire. We also have the entire universe of U.S. mutual funds available, and we do pay out the dividends automatically every morning on all mutual funds. So using a fixed income class, you probably need a lot fewer trades, but it's really focused more on the actual research side of it. If you're teaching a personal finance class, we have a lot of new materials available for personal finance. In fact, we set up a new service level for personal finance specifically. Let me see if I can pull it up here. When you go to create your classes, now the first question we ask you is your class subject. If you do select a personal finance class, this changes how some of the other pieces of the class creation works. We stripped down the personal finance classes. It's just U.S. stocks, ETFs, mutual funds, and bonds. But in exchange, we really opened up the assignments feature. If you look in this personal finance section of the assignments, there's about 60 items in here covering everything from budgeting, family planning, sales taxes, using credit cards, managing debt, and everything in between. So if you're using this in a personal finance class, you can come in here and then check off some of these articles that cover the topics that you're talking about in class, and then just have each assignment last a week or so for students to work through their portfolio, but while they're working through their portfolio, working through the actual topics that you're covering in class, and then we even have the career development section where they can start looking at the information about choosing an internship, the biggest mistakes we see from the fresh graduates looking for the first job, interviews, and things like that. For personal finance, it becomes more important to build these assignments weekly. You can always queue up multiple assignments ahead of time. Each assignment has its own start and due date. But for personal finance classes, it's more important to make sure they have something different to do matching up with your class materials compared to like a portfolio management class where the assignment becomes kind of secondary. So I'll do a quick walkthrough of actually setting up a class, setting the rules the way you like them, how to edit your rules, how to build an assignment, how to get your reports, and where to get some help if you need it. So once you've logged into a professor account, on the right side of the page here, the first place you need to go is this register new class. So from here, it's just a basic set of information about your class, and then it'll be set up right away. So class subject, I'll choose portfolio management. Service level, the service level determines A, the length of trading period you're allowed, and B, the max number of trades your students will get. So the gold one is the most popular. It's a longer trading period, which is good for the time horizons. And then you can also add the buy and hold to your class if you want to do the passive active portfolio project. The class name is just something that has to be unique to your class. We'll give you a link to give your students to get them registered, but you can also have them just enter the class name to get started. The number of students in your class, this doesn't actually affect anything, but when we have that number of 7 million students, it's based on this number of students in your class. So if you're pairing your students up in groups of teams of 2 or 3, still enter the actual number of students in your class. Payment method, you can have your students pay with a credit card when they register, or we can invoice the university. So it's if you have the university invoice and you're using teams, then you just put the number of actual teams here. Promo codes, we don't usually give out too many promo codes. If you see us at a conference, you might get one. Otherwise, we don't have many that actually are active at any given time. And then these are the registration and trading dates. So it's very common for professors to have their registration open for a couple of weeks before the class starts. Some professors will actually even close the registration before the trading begins. So as I mentioned with those assignments, you might want your trading to start a couple weeks in the future. That way your students get registered, they start their first assignment, and then they start trading a week or so later. All of this other information is basically for our internal reference, academic level description. The only one that's important is author of textbook. A lot of textbooks include a coupon code. If your students have this coupon code, they can put on the registration page to get either a discount or a free account, depending on the actual publisher. And then from here, you actually set the parameters for your class. So the currency of your portfolio, US and Canada, euros, pounds are the most common, but there's over 30 you can choose from. How much cash you want to give them to start with. For most classes, about $1 million is good. For personal finance classes, we recommend something lower, like 50 to 100,000. And for derivatives classes, it's something usually higher, giving them a lot more freedom to play around with futures and things. But if you pick $1 million or $100,000, you're going to be in good shape. You can put price ceilings and floors, or just price floors, to outlaw penny stocks, something like $3 or $5 for minimum stock price for both buying and shorting. If you don't allow shorting, this won't have any effect. You can also add things like Sharpe ratio and alpha beta rankings to your class. So instead of just having the general portfolio return, you can also have tabs on the rankings page that show the risk-adjusted returns. If you do use the Sharpe ratio rankings, it takes us 5 days before we can actually calculate it because we need some volatility on each student's portfolio. So it'll be 5 days after they place their first trade, their Sharpe ratio will start to appear. The alpha beta, we only get the beta for US stocks. So we only recommend using the alpha beta rankings for US stock portfolios. Otherwise, it's going to be less accurate. Whether or not your students can trade on margin, whether or not you want to have them start with a pre-populated starting portfolio. We have a few professors that like to have their students start out with, for example, a full portfolio of the SPY ETF, and then they can try to build out or build away from that depending on how they feel they need to be investing. Whether or not students can short sell and day trade, if you as the professor want to appear in the class rankings, so if you want to build your professor account as kind of a benchmark, you can leave yourself in. If you just want to be disappeared and have the students only, you can leave yourself out. The trading notes, as I mentioned, this would require those students to enter those short notes whenever they place a trade. Fill orders on daily volume. This is a realism parameter. We look at the liquidity of every stock, and students can only trade up to this percentage of what's been trading in the real world. For a personal finance or investments class, this is going to be set much lower, 50 to 25%. For a derivatives class, we usually recommend setting it higher. There's a lot of options in futures that just don't have very much volume on a particular strike price and expiration date, so this gives students a little bit more leeway of what they can actually trade. Next, you'll choose the security types your students allow to trade. You'll notice for every one of the security types, you also set the commission structure. Is going to be per trade, per share, is a percentage of the total trade, and you can also set the position limit. The position limit is how much of your student's portfolio can be in any one stock. So a 25% position limit would correspond to students need to have at least 4 stocks to use up all their cash. We have over 30 countries available for trading. The only comment here is that our US data feed is real-time bid-ask prices. For most of the rest of the world, it's on a 15-minute delay. So if you plan on handing out prizes for your class, we recommend to only restrict it to the US only. If you don't have any prizes, it's really just kind of for reference, then you can extend this to the whole universe. Mutual funds, bonds, options, futures, future options, spots. Spots also includes commodities. We have our Forex built into the spots trading. Everything uses real-time bid-ask prices except mutual funds, which of course are end of day, and one of the futures exchanges uses delayed data. So if you're doing any sort of prizes, then we recommend excluding the delayed option. You can also turn these, like I mentioned before, you can turn these on and off as your class goes on, but I'll just leave them all on for now. And then when you click Create Class, you will get this link here. This link is what you're going to give your students to get registered. We'll also email you a confirmation, and the confirmation will have a copy of this link. From a student's perspective, I'll open up the link and it takes them right to your class registration page. Everything's filled out for your class. It'll have your name and your class description. If they have a coupon code, they can enter it here. If you have your students working in teams, they can put in a secondary user with the first name, last name, email address, so you'll see that secondary user on your admin reports as well. Once your class trading rules are set up, this is where you're going to start looking at creating an assignment. If you're on the confirmation page, we make it easy. The assignment's right here. If you have already created your class and you want to add more assignments, from the right side of your professor dashboard, you'll see the Manage Assignments button. To create an assignment, first click the Create New Assignment. Give your assignment its own name, for example, like the Week 1 assignment, and then choose the start dates and due dates for that assignment. It's a good idea to not have the start and due dates overlap for any 2 assignments because students get confused about which one they're actually working on. They can only get credit for 1 assignment at a time. So start dates and due dates, and then start picking the items that you want your students to do. For all these read an article activities, these are basically short articles. They're written at a high school reading level, so all of your students are going to have no problems with it. Towards the end of each article, some of them have videos embedded in it, but most of them have a pop quiz. This is a 3 to 5 question quiz. The students can retake the quiz as many times as they need to, but they need to get all the questions right before they'll actually get credit for having read the article. For the videos, they'll get credit as soon as they start watching the video. The security types videos are a walkthrough of how to trade each security type, and then we have the other videos walking through the different types of limit orders and stop orders, managing a portfolio. This walks through basically what all the different pages on the site are. This is the first thing that we usually recommend students watch. And it's just general tutorials of walking them through how to actually make their trades and build their portfolio. The Career Center items are in here too. These are another ones that we recommend for most classes just because it helps reinforce career development. And then you can also require your students to make certain kinds of trades. So buy or sell a certain number of stocks, make a certain number of total trades. As you turn on those other security types, ask them to start buying and selling bonds, buying and selling mutual funds. Use different order types, the limit orders and stop orders. So the options and the futures and the spots trading is all built in here. So basically, as your class starts talking about different security types, we recommend turning those on for trading and creating an assignment, asking them to watch a tutorial video and then make a couple of trades to get them familiar. Once your assignment's created for your students, it's going to appear on their dashboard page. They'll also have an assignments page showing them what they need to do and how many of each item they need to do. And you as the professors will have access to a report card. The report card is on that same assignments page if you click to manage assignments, and it'll list every student, their name, their username, their portfolio value, and how far they've come on that assignment. The details button will show you what they've done for each individual item in that assignment. So once you have a couple assignments set up, your class is ready to go, your students are registered, once they start trading, you can also get full access to all of their portfolio information. This would be if you click the View Reports button on the right side here. The reports basically outlines everything that's happened in your class from the beginning of time. There's a few different tabs here. The first one's called the Summary Report. This will tell you how many students have registered, how many have activated, meaning they've placed at least one trade, how many total trades, and then if you need it, this is that invite link again, so you can give that to your students. The rank file, actually I don't have any data in here. Let me switch to a different account that has some data so I can show you what this looks like. So the ranking file is going to list all of the students in your class. And it'll also give you the ability to actually see all of their trades, see their Sharpe ratios, their alpha betas, and everything else. And there'll also be buttons where you can see all of their portfolio information, this View More button here. Open positions, their transactions, account balances, an estimate of their closed positions, realized profit loss, and you'll also get a page for all of their trading notes. And you also have the ability to add and remove cash from each student's account. So you can deposit cash, you can withdraw cash. And this is often used as like a class participation bonus. The next one here is we also have a student participation certificate. A lot of professors like giving this out towards the end of the class for the students who have used it. Basically, it's a PDF or a Word document. You can download it and give it to any students who are interested. The registration file report. This will list all the students in your class, the username, first name, last name. If you have the secondary student in here, this is where you'd find them as well. The user summary report has a little bit more granular information about what they've been doing, how many trades have they placed, when's the last time they made a trade, portfolio value, what their value was yesterday, how much cash they're holding, their buying power, their market value, etc. And this final report is called reports. Instead of looking at each student one by one, you can download a big Excel spreadsheet showing every student's open positions, every student's account balances, every student's trading history, and things like that. You can also export all of your historical portfolio values for every student. You can export all of the trade notes. This will let you break apart some of that bigger report one by one, whether you just want to see all the transactions or something like that. The last thing is that if you don't remember anything that I'm talking about today, or if you're referring a new professor who has never used StockTrak before, one of the most important places to start is called Professor Resources. So again, it's on the right side here. It's this last item. This is basically just information for professors to help them manage their classes. So this first thing here, class project ideas, these are some syllabi and some general projects that professors have submitted that they use in their classes. So if you're using StockTrak for the first time, or if you're looking for a different way to use their project, you can look through this database here of what other professors are doing. Most of them start with the foundation of build the portfolio, make your end of class reports, take notes, and then they build off it with different kinds of restrictions, different kinds of requirements. If you need some help registering or managing your class, this section here has tutorials, has video recordings. It's basically a better version of the walkthrough I just gave you. We have a text and images if you don't like videos, where it just walks through step by step of what you need to do. And then there's tutorials on the assignments feature as well. The Professor FAQ, this is a quick, faster version of just getting help about a specific question. The most common questions: what are the support hours? How do we do the splits and dividends? How many schools use us? That kind of thing. And you'll also notice there's a live chat on the bottom of most pages. So if you have any questions, you can always get in touch with the support team directly here. And if you're using StockTrak every semester, every year or so, you can also look at our changelog here to see what's new since last time. Whenever we add a new feature, we'll post a short blog post talking about what that feature is, how it works, and how it can be used in your classes. If you get our newsletter emails, you'll probably also see most of this already mentioned, but if you just want a refresher, if you want to check it out every semester when you're creating a class, you can see that here as well. So the next level, if you are using StockTrak in more than one class, or if you want to start expanding it to include a student investment club, if you want more things like that, we also have two better ways that you can expand your class usage. The first is through a site license to StockTrak.com. The site license will basically remove all the ads from the site. It will remove those service levels, so you can choose your class length as long as you want it to be, with as many trades as you want them to have. You can have as unlimited professors at your university within an unlimited number of classes. This will include things if you want to run like a department challenge, if you want to run a campus challenge, or even your student investment club. Over the last 2 years, we've seen about 15 universities expand out to department challenge and investment clubs. Part of that reason is to help encourage personal finance and investment literacy, and part of it is it just helps raise the profile of the business school and the finance department. A site license will get you up to 500 student accounts per year. The next level is if you want to do a university branding. We can also white label the entire StockTrak platform to your school's colors, logos, and things like that, with custom landing pages, customized content. This is used most often for schools that are doing the department and campus challenges, and we're also seeing a lot of schools working with the university recruiting department for running high school challenges in the summer. If you do run a campus challenge or a department challenge, we will sponsor some prizes up to $500, and this will cover up to 1,000 students per semester. So for example, this is Bentley University. They have their own homepage with their own branding, own pictures, own text. The inside of the site is also branded to them. It uses their logos. It uses their colors everywhere. And they even have their own lists of content and links that they want to feature. So if you have any questions about either of those, you can contact me or Tom on the sales team. He can help you. So that's it for me. Does anyone have any questions for me? Well, I'm seeing several professors leaving, so if you don't have any questions, then I'll end it here. If you do, you can always email me. My name is Kevin, so it's ksmith@stocktrak.com. Oh wait, I see one. How do I keep accounts from earning interest once registration has occurred? The credit and debit interest rates are controlled by us. I see we don't have it on the class creation page right now, but you can always use the live chat for the support team. We can just turn off interest earned on cash. I'm going to make a note of it now to actually put that on the page too, where you can set the interest earned on cash balances just to 0, and then they won't earn any interest. Okay, well, in that case, I think I will end this webinar. I will be sending out an email to everyone in the next couple of days with a link to this webinar's recording if you want to review it. Otherwise, you can always go to that professor resources that's at the top of the page. The professor resources is going to have basically everything you need to know to run your class. We're also going to post a recording of this webinar in here for professors who just want to reference to it. Why do some portfolios have a delay once trades happen? There can be a delay when a student makes a trade for a couple of reasons. The first is it might just take a second for the system to actually catch it. That's becoming less and less of an issue as we speed up the platform every year. The rank file that professors have access to, this one is not live. So if you go to your review reports and you go to the rankings here, this is actually from the end of day yesterday because we need the end of day data to get the Sharpe ratio. The student rankings page should be pretty much live. This should update as soon as students make trades, as soon as anything happens. Other reasons why there could be a delay, it could just be that the trade hasn't executed yet. That's the main culprit. In that case, it would sit in their the trade would sit in their order history page, which they can find under trading, the order history. This would let them cancel any limit orders or any orders that they've placed that haven't executed. For example, if they're trying to buy a stock that has no volume, the order's not going to execute, things like that. But generally speaking, we've been getting fewer and fewer comments of any delay in portfolio updates. So for example, if I go here and I trade a stock, it should appear in my portfolio pretty much right away. Yeah, it's already here. It takes usually less than a second if the markets are open. Under the portfolio summary with the My Portfolio tab, the SPY ETF at start date displays as 0 and the ETF return at 0%. So way to have that updated. That sounds like it's a bug on our end. It would be specific to your class. So can you just send me an email and then we can get that fixed for you? It looks like we might have skipped a day with our snapshot of the ETF. Otherwise, yeah, we can get that fixed right away. How do I set a trade for sure to execute tomorrow if I enter it tonight? There's never a for sure because it's always restricted by the day's volume. But if you place any trade when the market's closed, the system will try to execute it as soon as the market opens tomorrow morning. The only time that I've ever seen an issue with that is if they're trying to buy a stock that just has no volume. And that's just because if it has no volume, then there's no market data in our data feed for us to actually fill the order. But generally speaking, if a student's coming in at night and they're placing a trade for tomorrow morning, it'll execute as soon as the market opens. If for some reason they suspect it might not, like they're trying to trade something with fairly low volume, the easiest way is to enter the order price as a limit order, actually as a stop order, with their stop price well below the current market price. So Microsoft here is trading at $93. If I set my limit price to $40 and my order term is good till cancel, this means that as soon as there's sufficient volume for this order to fill, it's going to fill. But this really only comes up with trading options that have low volume and futures that have low volume, or some usually OTC stocks with low volume, because students are probably trying to trade a quantity greater than the current day's volume, and that's where the issue comes from most often. Okay, in that case, I'm going to close the webinar. Thank you for joining me. Have a great day. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out by email. You can call us. We have you can find our contact information by going to help at the top of the page. The About Us has our corporate sales, our support lines, and there's always the Professor Help, the Professor FAQs as well for any questions or help you may need. So have a great morning, have a great afternoon, and thank you for joining me.